Hey guys, tonight we begin somewhere quiet, where the wind rolls in gently across a red desert, and the morning sun doesn't rise so much as it yawns across the horizon. You're not in a house with creaky floorboards or glowing screens. You're in a traditional Navajo hogan, a round earthen home, facing east. Always east. So the first light of day can enter, as if the dawn itself were politely knocking on the door. Outside, it's dry and cool. Inside, it smells faintly of cedarwood and ash. A low fire crackles in the center. You hear the rustle of woven blankets, the kind that aren't just warm, they tell stories. Your elder, the one whose face is a gentle topography of time, is already up. Of course, she's been up for a while, singing the hazo, the prayer for balance and beauty. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is, especially if you're still wide awake at 2 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up slowly, brushing off sleep like dust. A warm cup of something earthy, blue corn mush with a little cedar ash, waits for you. It's not coffee, but it clears your mind. You wrap yourself in a sheep wool shawl. The elder hands you a small pouch of corn pollen. You pause. She nods toward the doorway. You follow her outside, barefoot on the sandy ground that still remembers the night's chill. The sun is just beginning to rise. There's no ceremony with drums or painted faces, just the gentle scattering of corn pollen to the east, and a whispered blessing you don't fully understand but feel in your bones. Historians still argue whether these morning rituals were purely spiritual or also psychological, a way of ordering the mind as well as the world. But there's no need to settle that question now. The day unfolds slowly. You're told that in Navajo tradition, the wind is sacred. It lives in your breath. The idea that air is alive might sound poetic, but to the people here, it's practical too. If you speak with anger, you poison the wind. If you speak with care, you honor it. So you speak little. You listen more. You help tidy the hogan. There's a quiet rhythm to it, dusting shelves, stacking firewood, sweeping with a bundle of yucca fibers. Everything has its place. The walls are decorated with small weavings and family photos in wooden frames. One of them shows a woman in a long skirt standing beside a sheep pen. Could have been taken 80 years ago, or yesterday. Outside, you walk past sheep grazing calmly. They're smaller than you expected, and each one seems to glance up as you pass, like furry elders in disguise. A child waves at you from atop a small hill, holding a stick like a shepherd's staff. Later, you're taught how to recognize medicinal herbs, green thread for tea, snakeweed for poultices. You kneel next to a plant and learn its Navajo name. It's a mouthful. You repeat it softly, getting it wrong at least 3 times. The elder chuckles. You pick up a smooth stone lying half-buried in the dirt. It's just a rock, you say, because of course it is. But she raises an eyebrow. That's not just a rock. It's from the canyon where the holy people once walked. You quietly return it to its place. The idea of memory embedded in place, that's something Western cities forgot. Everything there moves too fast, too functional. But here, every trail, every ridge, every shade of earth seems to carry a soft murmur of meaning. Did you know Navajo sand painting, used in healing ceremonies, was never meant to last? Artists would spend hours creating these intricate spiritual maps, only to let the wind scatter them at the end. Imagine that, spending all day painting a masterpiece, and then letting the breeze erase it. It's not about keeping the beauty, it's about letting it go. By midday, the sun is high. You sit beneath the slight shadow of a cottonwood tree, drinking cool water from a gourd. The elder hums an old tune. She taps your arm and points up, hawks circling overhead. You see that? She asks. You nod. That's someone's ancestor watching you, she says matter-of-factly. Then, without explanation, she starts peeling a roasted pinyon nut and pops it in her mouth. You follow suit. The nut is rich, buttery, slightly sweet. There's no rush here. Even time seems to stretch, yawn, and sit down beside you. Mainstream historians often point out that the Navajo developed an intricate pastoral economy, with livestock management systems that rivaled early European ones in complexity. But that's not what you remember from this day. You remember the hush, the pollen in the wind, the way your breath slows as the land teaches you how to listen. And you're only just getting started. The elder taps your shoulder again. Her voice is calm, but there's a sparkle to it. "Time to visit the weavers," she says, as if this were as natural as brushing your teeth. You rise, brushing off the dust from your knees, and begin walking beside her across a plateau shimmering with light. The path winds gently between low mesas. You're not entirely sure where you're going. There are no road signs, no GPS beeps, but she moves with confidence. You simply follow the shuffle of her soft moccasins. The silence is occasionally broken by a bird's call or the rustle of sagebrush. You catch the scent of juniper riding the breeze. It's oddly comforting, like the smell of an old wooden bookshelf. Soon, you reach a cluster of homes, some traditional hogans and some small houses with corrugated roofs. Dogs trot lazily between them, tails swaying like reeds in the current. You're led into a shaded area where a loom has been set up. Under the shade cloth, an older woman is already working, her hands in a slow, hypnotic dance with the wool. She nods at you without pausing. Her loom creaks softly, the warp threads pulled tight like a harp strung by gravity. On her lap is a ball of wool the color of warm rust. Next to her, bundles dyed indigo, mustard yellow, cactus green. You sit on a folded blanket, cross-legged. The elder beside you whispers, "Every rug is a map." You glance at the weaving again. There are jagged shapes that look like mountains, lines that resemble rivers or lightning, blocks that pulse like heartbeat rhythms. The design isn't symmetrical, and that, she explains, is intentional. It's called a spirit line. One thread in the design leads outward, away from the pattern like a little exit door. The purpose? So the weaver's spirit doesn't get trapped inside the design. Imagine that. Even your creativity needs a way out sometimes. Historians still argue whether this custom was purely symbolic or also a clever psychological safeguard, a built-in reminder not to obsess over perfection. But you don't need the answer now. You just watch. She weaves for what feels like hours, though time has a strange way of softening here. You eventually notice your breathing matching the rhythm of her hands. Pull, tuck, beat. Pull, tuck, beat. You could fall asleep to it. And maybe you do for a moment. You're nudged awake by a boy offering you fry bread, fresh and warm, wrapped in a cloth napkin. You bite into it. It's slightly crispy on the outside, soft and chewy on the inside. He grins as you reach for a second piece. Later, you're taught how the wool is prepared. Not by reading a sign or listening to a podcast, but by actually carding raw sheep wool between two wooden paddles. It's tougher than it looks. The elder watches you fumble with the tufts like a cat trying to fold laundry. She doesn't laugh, but she is smiling. Then comes spinning. The spindle is ancient in design, just a stick and a whirl, but it works like magic. You twist the fibers, watching them tighten into thread. Suddenly, you're part of a tradition thousands of years old. Did you know that some of the earliest Navajo weavings incorporated motifs from Pueblo, Spanish, and even Mexican designs? It wasn't isolation, it was fusion. Trade routes, both formal and informal, ran through these lands. Traders brought yarns, dyes, and stories, and the weavers, always adaptable, wove them into something new. You glance at a pattern of interlocking triangles. Mountains, the woman says, then a series of zigzags. Water paths, a diamond, eye of the spirit. You nod slowly, unsure if she means a literal eye or something deeper. Maybe both. And here's a fun little twist. The famed chief's blanket, a highly prized weaving, wasn't originally designed for actual tribal chiefs. It was a trader's term, catchy marketing from the 1800s. But the name stuck. Now, it echoes across museums, auction houses, and whispered family heirloom tales. You help pack up the loom as the sun starts sinking behind the hills. The light turns syrupy. Shadows stretch, yawn, and curl around the hogans. As you walk back with the elder, you notice a tiny bird hopping beside the trail. That's Tsidiai, she says. Little messenger. Likes to spy. You tilt your head at it. The bird looks back, unblinking, like it knows something you don't. Night begins its slow descent, one blue layer at a time. And by the time you reach home, the stars have begun poking through the sky like pinholes in deep velvet. The fire inside the hogan is burning low. You sink onto a sheepskin mat and exhale. You think back to the spirit line, that little escape thread, and you wonder what would your own spirit line look like? Where would it lead? The elder sits across from you, humming again. This time it's a song for evening. Not exactly a lullaby, but something close. You don't understand the words, but somehow they understand you. The hum fades into silence. You wake not with a start, but as though gently called back by something soft and familiar, like a whisper carried through a dream. Morning light filters through the smoke hole in the ceiling, casting a golden cone that dances with the dust motes. Outside, the world is already in motion. The elder greets you with a knowing nod, like she expected you to rise just then. Today, she says, we walk the old trade path. You lace up your shoes, though part of you is tempted to go barefoot like the children running past, and follow her through a narrow canyon. The air is cool here, and the walls are streaked with iron and manganese, like nature's brushstrokes across sandstone. Your footsteps echo. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls, a familiar sound that always feels slightly like a riddle. Soon you find yourself stepping into a long stretch of dry, level earth. You wouldn't know it by looking, but this was once part of the ancient Chaco trade network, an entire web of footpaths, pack trails, and caravan routes that connected distant communities, from the turquoise mines in the south to the salmon traders of the northwest. You pause. Wait, salmon? In the desert? Yes, that's one of the quirks. Dried salmon from the Pacific coast, found among ruins hundreds of miles inland. Historians still argue whether it was regular trade, ceremonial exchange, or just one fish that went on a really impressive vacation. Either way, it's here, or at least it was. Along the path, the elder points to smooth stones still embedded in the soil. They used to lay them down to mark direction, she says. So you didn't wander in sandstorms. It hits you, these aren't just trails. They're memory, routes carved by repetition, by sandal tread and intention. And unlike highways, these paths moved with people, not over them. You pass a set of petroglyphs etched into a canyon wall. Spirals, ladders, bighorn sheep, a man with hands raised to a cluster of stars. Star maps, she murmurs, or stories, or both. She offers you a dried fruit to chew, something tart and sticky. You guess it's wild plum. Then she begins telling you about the runners, long-distance messengers, young men and women trained to cover enormous distances between villages, carrying not scrolls or letters but oral messages, entire conversations memorized and relayed without missing a syllable. They were like the postal service, the gossip network, and the emergency hotline all rolled into one. You try to imagine running 60 miles in one day, on foot, in sandals, in the desert. You probably wouldn't survive that, to be honest. But they did. And they didn't just survive, they thrived. Some wore feathers to announce arrivals. Others carried carved sticks as proof of identity. Their lungs must have been legendary. As you walk, the elder points out a low rise with stones stacked in a wide oval. Marketplace, she says. People came from far to trade. Shells, feathers, dyes, food, songs. Songs? You ask. She nods. Some songs only meant to be sung on arrival. A gift. You wonder about that. A melody that only exists because two strangers meet on dust-covered ground. And once sung, it's gone. No recording. No repeat. At the center of the marketplace sits a flat stone, almost like an altar. For agreements, she says. For making peace. You sit for a moment on that stone. Try to imagine the chatter, the clink of pots, the bartering in languages now only half remembered. You wonder what your currency would have been. Probably not Bitcoin. One odd fact you learn. Cacao residue has been found in pottery here. Yes, chocolate. from Central America. Imagine walking across hundreds of miles just to deliver a handful of beans that someone will drink ceremonially under starlight. You like that idea? Traveling all that way, just so someone else can smile into a bitter, sacred cup. The sun is climbing high now, and the shadows shorten. The elder takes you off the main path and into a narrow draw between cliffs. The wind changes temperature, it's cooler here, damper. At the end of the draw, hidden from plain sight, is a small spring bubbling from the rock. Mossy, ancient, and quiet. You're told this was a resting spot, a secret one, for runners, for travelers, for anyone carrying something that couldn't afford to be lost. You kneel beside the spring and touch the water. It's colder than expected. You cup some in your hands, drink slowly. You swear you can taste time. Later, as you retrace your steps, you ask about the old trail's end. Where did it all go? The elder shrugs gently. Some parts became highways. Some were forgotten. But the land remembers. If you listen, and you do listen, to the crunch of your footsteps, to the call of a faraway hawk, to the wind speaking in a language older than any written one. By the time you return to the hogan, your muscles ache. Not painfully, but in that satisfying, I did something real kind of way. You sit by the fire, rubbing your calves, and think of the runners, the silent messages, the cocoa, the songs. Tonight, you fall asleep not to the lull of weaving, but to the memory of footsteps, steady, rhythmic, as though someone long ago is still carrying a message for you, just over the horizon. The next day arrives like a whisper, the soft rustling of wind through dry grass, the rhythmic cooing of a morning dove. It's a gentle reminder that life here doesn't leap forward. It unfolds, like a woven blanket pulled slowly over your shoulders. You stretch under your blanket, legs a bit sore from yesterday's walk along the trade route. But it's the good kind of sore, the kind that reminds you your body still knows how to move through ancient rhythms. Today's lesson begins before breakfast. The elder hands you a worn, polished stone. Mortar, she says, and then gives you its partner. A stone pestle shaped perfectly to your grip, like it's been waiting for your hand all along. You follow her to the cooking shelter, where several women are already working, laughter rising like steam from their clay pots. The air smells earthy and faintly sweet, roasted corn, maybe. But first, you're invited to learn the oldest language of all, grinding. Maize kernels, dried until they rattle like beads in your palm, are poured into the basin. You press the pestle down and begin the circular motion. It's harder than it looks. Your arm complains almost immediately. You switch to two hands. That helps. The elder laughs softly. It's not just grinding, she says. It's remembering. And soon you begin to see what she means. Because with each motion, each crunch and shift, your body settles into a rhythm that feels older than memory. The sound is oddly hypnotic. Stone against stone, breath in, breath out. You're not just preparing food. You're singing a song in a language with no words. The same song someone sang 500 years ago, kneeling just like you. When your arms are too tired to continue, someone else takes over. You're given a seat near the fire and handed a drink in a clay mug. It's thick, warm, and unexpected. Is that cinnamon? Turns out, it's a traditional atoll, cornmeal mixed with water, and sometimes flavored with spices or honey. This version has a hint of ash. From the fire, you're told, gives it body. You sip slowly. It grows on you, in the way that quiet places grow on you. As the morning turns to midday, you're brought into a different kind of kitchen. Not for cooking, but for preservation. Here, dried fruits are being sorted into bundles. Wild plum, chokecherry, yucca root. Someone points to a string of tiny, sun-dried mice. You try not to make a face. High protein, they say with a wink. You still make a face. But it's not just about calories. It's about survival. These communities knew how to stretch a harvest through the bitterest winter, how to turn bark into tea, how to ferment cactus into syrup, how to take a single rabbit and make it last for 3 days across 4 families. Historians still argue whether these food practices were driven more by necessity or spiritual reverence. Probably both, because nothing was wasted, not even the silence. You're handed a piece of flatbread. It's made of blue cornmeal and roasted on a slab of hot stone. The texture is dense, but the flavor, nutty, slightly smoky, is comforting. You imagine eating this while watching a thunderstorm roll over the mesa. As you chew, the elder begins to tell you about food taboos. Some tribes believed that certain foods must not be consumed during mourning. Others that pregnant women should avoid specific herbs. One community banned eating bear entirely, out of deep respect. He is too much like us, one saying goes. Walks on two legs. Dreams like a man. There's even a legend, softly whispered, never shouted, about a village that once fed a stranger a sacred dish out of hospitality, not knowing he was a spirit in disguise. He blessed them with rain for 7 years, or cursed them with fog, depending on which version you believe. You move to the shade, where a few people are wrapping tamales in corn husks. Not every tribe did tamales, someone tells you, but the idea, wrapping, steaming, sharing, was everywhere. You help fold a few, fingers clumsy at first. They show you how to twist the ends like candy. They hold better that way. You smile. There's something oddly satisfying about making a food that looks like a gift. One woman nearby is pounding juniper berries with a flat rock. She's making a seasoning blend, her own grandmother's mix. We don't measure, she says. We remember. You learn that spices weren't just flavor. They were medicine, antibacterial, digestive, sacred. Sage, when burned, was not just ceremonial, it also chased away mosquitoes and bad moods. Now someone brings you something curious. A piece of cake. Well, not cake in the bakery sense. It's more like a dense, chewy slab of seeds, honey, dried berries, and ground roots. Travel food, they say, lasts forever, tastes better if you're walking. You take a bite. It's weirdly good, like the ancestor of your modern protein bar, except made by someone who actually knows what they're doing. And just when you think you've seen every kind of ingredient, someone brings out salt from a desert basin. Pink and flaky, like it was chipped from the earth's crust itself. This, they say, was worth walking 100 miles for. A hush falls as the sun starts to dip, casting long shadows over the outdoor hearth. A final pot is lifted from the coals. A stew of corn, beans, squash, and wild herbs. The three sisters, they call it, a holy trinity of nourishment. You eat slowly, reverently, as the fire pops and the coyotes begin their distant, musical complaints. You're not just full. You're connected, not to calories, not to cuisine, but to something warm, remembered, and shared. Something cooked slowly, with hands that still carry the shape of stone pestles and ancient wisdom. You lean back against a log, the taste of earth and flame still on your tongue. And as someone offers you another mug of atoll, you smile and think, you probably wouldn't survive a full harvest season, but you'd gladly stay for dinner again. The next morning arrives not with an alarm clock, but with birdsong and the quiet crackle of a rekindled fire. You stretch beneath your woven blanket, the scent of smoldering wood wafting through the doorway. Somewhere nearby, a baby giggles, then immediately starts to wail. Life goes on. Today, you're not preparing food or walking trade routes. Today, you're learning about healing. Not the kind with white coats and prescriptions, but the kind where medicine smells like cedar and looks suspiciously like dirt. You're introduced to a woman with eyes like polished river stones. She wears a pouch at her hip and walks like she knows things the trees haven't learned yet. Medicine woman, someone whispers. Don't call her that to her face, though. You're invited into a shaded shelter where bundles of dried plants hang from the ceiling like botanical wind chimes. Sage, tobacco, sweetgrass, cedar, each tied with care and hung with purpose. The scent is complicated, earthy, bitter, comforting, like opening an old book in a forest. She begins simply. Everything you need is already growing around you. Then she hands you a root. It looks like something you'd avoid on a hike, but she encourages you to hold it. Smell it, feel it, listen, even. You try. It smells faintly like licorice and old wood. She tells you it's osha root, used for respiratory issues, sore throats, and protection in some spiritual ceremonies. You nod respectfully, even though you're still not sure whether to eat it or bury it. She shows you more yarrow for cuts, wild mint for digestion, juniper berries for purifying water. Some of it sounds familiar, like distant cousins of your grandmother's tea cabinet. Others are completely foreign. Then comes a moment of levity. She hands you a clump of tree bark and says, "This'll clean you out faster than gossip through a village." You believe her. Historians still argue whether indigenous healing was primarily symbolic or biologically effective. But in practice, the line between medicine and ritual was rarely drawn. Healing wasn't just about the body, it was about the spirit, and sometimes the land itself. You're invited to watch a smudging ceremony. Smoke from burning sage is waved gently toward the body using a feather fan. It's not performative. It's precise. The smoke doesn't just cleanse. It reveals. You watch it spiral into the air, catching on the light like ghost handwriting. The healer explains that illness, in this worldview, isn't always about germs or wounds. Sometimes it's about disharmony, with others, with yourself, with the land. You think about that for a while. Later, you help prepare a poultice from crushed plantain leaves and honey. It's meant for insect bites, but someone jokingly suggests it could fix a broken heart if you used enough honey. You're not sure if they're wrong. Out in the open again, the medicine woman takes you on a slow walk. Plant walk, she calls it. She points to a clump of what looks like ordinary weeds. Navajo tea, she says. Good for kidneys, terrible for first dates. Further along, she stops to show you a cactus with tiny red fruits. Prickly pear. Eat too many and you'll regret it, but the syrup's good for blood sugar. You ask how she knows what all of this does. She shrugs and says, trial, error, and long conversations with grandmothers. There's humor in her eyes, but reverence in her voice. You get the sense that every plant has a backstory. A failed expedition, a long illness, a sudden recovery. The healing knowledge in this community wasn't written down. It was carried, like water or grief. You learn about talking cures, not therapy in the modern sense, but the act of storytelling as medicine. When someone was sick, elders would gather and tell them a healing story. The idea was that the right tale could stir the spirit to wakefulness. One story involves a hummingbird who healed a mountain by whispering jokes to it until the stones stopped being angry. You're not sure how that relates to kidney stones, but it's charming. As you sit by a small fire at dusk, the medicine woman hands you a warm drink, pine needle tea, rich in vitamin C. Sip, she says. No gulpin. This isn't coffee. The tea tastes like forest breath. You feel your shoulders drop an inch. The conversation turns toward dreams. You learn that some illnesses were thought to arrive first in dreams as warnings. And if you ignored them, well, you wouldn't be the first. Dreams are how your soul checks its mail, she says. She invites you to sleep with a small pouch of herbs under your pillow tonight, mugwort and sweetgrass, for clarity and protection. You don't argue. You just thank her and cradle the pouch like it's made of glass. As you prepare for bed, someone points out a plant growing at the edge of the village. That's devil's claw, they say, used for pain and arthritis. You walk over and kneel beside it. The leaves are jagged, the stems fierce, but there's beauty in its resilience, like it's daring you to underestimate it. And for a moment, in the cooling air, you realize this entire place is like that. Seemingly quiet, wildly wise, rooted in something older than memory. You return to your blanket, pouch tucked under your head, the scent of mugwort rising slowly into your thoughts. Somewhere nearby, an owl hoots once, and silence returns. You're not just learning old medicine. You're becoming part of it. You wake to soft drumming in the distance. Not ceremonial, not loud. Just a slow, steady rhythm like a heartbeat coming through the trees. You sit up, still clutching your sleep pouch, and inhale the scent of morning dew and ashes. You slept deeper than you have in years. Today, you learn that a village is not a grid of buildings. It's a pulse. Children are already playing, inventing a game involving stones, feathers, and rules that seem to change every 3 minutes. Elders sit in a half-circle near the fire, quietly discussing something with the gravity of a United Nations summit. You're not sure what the topic is, but it involves fish, marriage, and possibly a raccoon. You're told you'll spend the day helping with what they call the weave. It's not a physical tapestry, though you'll see plenty of those. It's the social fabric, the roles, rituals, and little exchanges that hold the community together like knotted thread. You start with the potters. A group of women sit in a shaded area, shaping clay into bowls using nothing but their hands, gravity, and years of memory. One gestures for you to try. Your first attempt looks like a melted cereal box. She smiles gently and says, "Maybe it's a fish trap instead." As your hands work the clay, the conversation meanders. They speak of weddings, of dream signs, of what it means when the ravens refuse to look you in the eye. You listen, trying not to drop your lump of mud on your foot. Next, you're shown a series of woven belts and sashes, each pattern a kind of biography. Lines, knots, colors, all tell a story. Marriages, journeys, floods, famines, even jokes. One sash, you're told, depicts the time a dog stole an entire deer hide and buried it in the chief's garden. Historians still argue whether some of these patterns were purely decorative or used as memory aids. Someone whispers, but to the people who wear them, they're not in doubt. The past is wrapped around their waists. Later, you join in a communal cooking effort. It's not just about feeding people, it's about reweaving the day. There's corn to grind, squash to cut, beans to stir. Together they form what's known today as the Three Sisters. You're told they grow best when planted together. Corn gives structure, beans climb the stalks, squash shades the soil. Like a good marriage, someone says. Support, climb, protect. You stir a thick stew and glance around. Laughter bubbles up. A grandmother tells a child to quit stirring like a hungry ghost. Another woman tastes your broth and nods with a satisfied grunt. You feel oddly proud. Then the drums return. This time, the rhythm quickens slightly. A signal, not a performance. You're led to a clearing where men and women begin a ceremonial dance. Not in regalia, just their everyday clothes. The movements are modest, grounded, almost like walking but with extra soul. You're invited to join. Your steps are clumsy. Someone kindly redirects your feet. Left, not right. Unless you want to summon winter early. The dance isn't about perfection. It's about participation, about syncing your breath to the breath of the group. You start to understand why they call it a weave. Every move strengthens an invisible fabric. You learn that roles aren't fixed by titles but by energy. A quiet man with a limp turns out to be a celebrated storyteller. A teenage girl who never stops humming is considered a spiritual anchor. She keeps people light when the world gets heavy. As the sun begins to dip, someone hands you a long cord and gestures toward a group making netting. You tie knots. You mess up. You start again. Eventually, your piece is declared acceptable for catching very lazy fish. You're pulled aside and told a story that's barely whispered. Once, a village tried to ban laughter during mourning seasons. The whole place grew sick. People tripped over their own feet. The fish stopped biting. Birds mocked them from the trees. Eventually, a grandmother stood in the square, told a joke about a turtle who tried to fly using pigeons, and everything returned to normal. You're told the lesson is, weave grief gently, but don't forget to not enjoy. The evening slows, food is shared, stories passed, and someone sings a lullaby you don't understand but feel in your ribs. There's no spectacle, no climax, just closeness. Historians often overlook these micro-moments. There's no war to record, no treaty to archive. But here, in this village rhythm, you feel the quiet force of community. It doesn't announce itself. It simply wraps you in thread after invisible thread until you realize you're not on the outside anymore. As you settle by the fire for the night, Someone places a new woven sash around your waist. It's not elaborate, but it's yours now. You're part of the story, they say. You watch the sparks lift toward the stars, your body full of stew, your mind full of knots, soft, sacred, and strong. Morning arrives not with alarm clocks, but with the creak of bark, the shuffle of feet, and a rooster somewhere having a philosophical argument with the sunrise. You stretch beneath your hide blanket, the woven sash still tied around your waist from last night. It itches a little, but in a comforting way, like a memory you didn't know you had. Today, you're told you'll be walking. Not just for the sake of walking, though that alone would be a treat. You're going to follow the paths. Not just dirt trails, but ancient lines etched into the land by generations of careful, repetitive footsteps. Some call them desire paths. In this village, they're simply the threads we don't cut. Your guide for the day is a man with a walking stick that has more personality than most professors. The stick has a crooked top, some etched symbols, and a feather tied near its middle. It's not magical, he says, just bossy. You start with the foot trail leading toward what appears to be a humble creek. But it's not just water, it's memory in motion. This is where we gather stories, he explains. Not metaphorically, literally. Every spring when the fish return, so do the tales. New ones, old ones, and some so strange they probably started with a prankster uncle. As you walk, your guide points out plants that serve more than one purpose. A stalk that becomes both a tea and a dye. A berry that nourishes but stains everything you own. And a root that, when chewed, makes your tongue go numb. We save that one for ceremonies, he winks. Or mother-in-laws. Every few minutes, you pass little markers. Stones stacked just so, bark peeled in a deliberate spiral, feathers tucked into crevices. These are memory spots, bookmarks for those who know how to read the land. Some mark births, others weddings. A few mark where someone laughed so hard they fell over and twisted their ankle. Not every memory needs to be tragic, he says. Historians still debate whether these paths functioned as a kind of oral mapping system or were simply habitual, formed by repetition rather than intention. You suspect it's both. After all, you've been walking for hours and the path still knows exactly where it's going, even if you don't. You arrive at a clearing where the trees bend slightly inward, forming what looks like a natural amphitheater. It's empty now, but your guide tells you this is where seasonal councils take place. Decisions aren't shouted here. They're passed like warm bowls of stew, from one person to another, tasted, considered, refined. You sit a while, listening to the leaves whisper above you. You're told that, before formal language, there were tree sounds. People imitated the wind to express longing, the crack of ice to show anger, the patter of rain to apologize. You try it. You sound like a squirrel with stage fright. Next stop, a grove of medicinal plants tended by women known as the root keepers. They wear simple bracelets made of bark and beads, and they greet you not with questions but with smells, handing you bundles to sniff, one after the other. Some are floral, some are spicy. One smells like wet socks dipped in pepper, but apparently cures headaches. And husbands, one woman chuckles. You're shown how certain roots must be dug only at dawn, and some only if you've had good dreams the night before. The plant knows, they insist. You find this both charming and slightly unsettling. You can't remember your dream. You dig anyway. One root keeper lets you hold a pouch filled with dried mushrooms used in vision quests. She warns you not to taste, just hold. Some dreams aren't for bedtime, she murmurs. On the way back, your guide shares a fringe theory he loves. That certain trails hum if you walk with your eyes closed. You try it. You mostly trip over a root and land in a bush. But you do feel something. Whether it's the wind, the scent, or just your brain playing along, you don't care. Feels true. There's a pause in the walk as you reach a tall rock split cleanly down the middle. You're told lovers meet here. Some say the crack formed after two arguing spirits got tired and fell asleep mid-fight. You sit beside it for a while. It's warm from the sun. As twilight creeps in, the guide leads you down one last path, one used only during grieving. It's narrower, quieter, wrapped in moss.
No markers. No birdsong.
Just breath. Sometimes, he says, we walk this path to remember what we've lost, and sometimes to remember we can keep walking. You nod, saying nothing. The silence is its own kind of thread. You return to the village after dark, feet tired but soul strangely alert. Someone brings you a cup of bark tea and points toward a hammock. You sink into it like a stone returning to riverbed. Above you, stars begin their own slow walking dance across the sky, connecting invisible stories, one dot to the next. You wonder how many people once traced their own troubles to the constellations, only to find peace instead of answers. The paths are quiet now, but you know they're still there, waiting for more feet, more stories, more knots in the grand invisible weave. You wake with a crick in your neck and the distinct impression that a squirrel has been judging you from a nearby branch all night. Morning is gentler today, less rooster debate, more soft rustling of leaves and the faint sound of a drum warming up in the distance. You're told it's a special day. Not a holiday in the modern sense, no balloons, no confetti, no commemorative mugs. Today is a talking circle day, something that happens not by calendar but by consensus. Enough people have enough feelings, so the community gathers to make space for them. You follow the slow current of people toward the gathering lodge, a round wooden structure with a smoke hole in the center. It smells of cedar, warm stone, and something sweet, maybe sage or the memory of pancakes. You're offered a seat on a fur-lined bench. The circle is already forming. Here's the rule. No one interrupts, no one fixes, no one scrolls. You speak when the talking stick or feather or stone is passed to you. Until then, you listen, not with the intent to reply but with the intent to understand. The stick starts its journey. An older man with hair like wind-polished silver tells a story about the first time he saw a bear and cried. Not out of fear, but because the bear reminded him of his grandmother. A young girl speaks next, describing how she's afraid of forgetting her native words. Her voice shakes, but no one rushes her. A middle-aged woman confesses that her dreams lately have been filled with birds flying into windows. Not dying, she says, just confused. When the stick reaches you, you panic slightly. What do you say? Do you confess that last night you dreamt you were a potato being peeled by a fox? Do you admit that you've never sat this quietly for this long without a phone in your hand? Instead, you simply say, "This is my first circle, and I'm grateful to be in it." That's enough. Historians still argue whether these speaking rituals were purely therapeutic or had ceremonial, even judicial functions. Some believe circles were used to settle disputes. Others think they were more about maintaining the emotional weather of the community. One scholar called them the earliest form of group therapy, minus the awkward coffee and insurance paperwork. After the circle ends, no one claps. There's no performance here. People begin to prepare food, tend to the fire, or wander off for quiet reflection. You linger near a grandmother who is softly weaving a band of cloth. Each thread she pulls seems connected to something much older than her. She smiles and explains that what you just witnessed isn't a tradition. It's a rhythm, she says. We just fall back into it when life gets too noisy. You're handed a bowl of stew. Not the kind served in fancy restaurants with foam on top, but hearty, thick, honest stew. It smells of game meat and wild onions with maybe a secret potato or two. You eat in silence. Not because you have to, but because the silence now feels like part of the meal. Then comes the drumming. A slow, heartbeat rhythm begins, deep and measured, like someone tapping the earth's own pulse. You sit cross-legged near the edge, half listening, half floating. The drum is joined by a low chant, not words exactly, but sounds that rise and fall like waves. You close your eyes, and for a moment you're not in a lodge. You're not a tourist. You're not even quite human. You're rhythm. One of the singers tells you later that this particular chant was used for easing transitions between seasons, ages, or even lives. It's not goodbye music, he explains. It's more like, okay, here we go. Quirky fact alert. Some communities believed that a well-sung chant could mend a broken pot, sweeten bitter roots, or even untangle bad dreams. Others used certain rhythms to guide hunting parties or predict the weather. One rhythm, when played fast enough, was said to scare off gossip. Tempting, right? Outside the lodge, the sun is filtering through trees like liquid gold. Children are playing a game that involves chasing each other with feathers and yelling things like, "You're the spirit of the squirrel now." You can't quite follow the rules, but the joy is universal. A quiet elder sits nearby, carving faces into bits of driftwood. "These are the emotions we don't say out loud," he tells you. One is frowning with tired eyes. Another is wide-eyed and slightly manic. One looks like it just heard a really bad joke. "That one's Monday," he chuckles. You're invited to carve your own. You try. Yours ends up looking like someone halfway between laughter and indigestion. The elder nods solemnly and says, "That's the face of trying your best." By late afternoon, the lodge is quieter, the drumming a memory still echoing in your chest. Someone sings a lullaby to no one in particular, and it hangs in the air like warm fog. You feel something loosen inside you. Not something big, just a knot you didn't know you'd been carrying. Maybe it was a name you forgot to say out loud. Maybe it was a hurt you never acknowledged because you thought no one would care. But here, in this lodge, with these people, even unspeakable things seem to have a shape. And when something has a shape, it can be held. And when it can be held, it can be passed, like the talking stick, until it no longer feels like yours alone. You rise slowly, bones creaking like old branches, and step outside. The day is almost done. You head toward the fire pit, where stories are beginning to bloom again, like stars poking through twilight. You sit, you listen, and for the first time in a long while, you feel not just heard, but held. The fire crackles in soft, deliberate bursts, like it's whispering secrets you're not quite supposed to understand. You find yourself watching the embers drift upward into the evening sky, curling like lazy dancers, vanishing into stars. Tonight's stories aren't being told in English. Not at first. A woman with long braids and eyes like a storm cloud begins to speak in her native tongue. You don't know the words, but the cadence is comforting. It's not what she says, but how she says it, like she's braiding history into the dark. Her voice rises and falls like a lullaby left out in the wind too long. You lean closer. Eventually, she switches into English, not perfectly, but earnestly, and tells the story of the night sky. Not the textbook version with hydrogen fusion and light years. This version involves a turtle, a jealous hummingbird, and a group of stars who couldn't agree on what direction to twinkle in. It's unexpectedly peaceful. Historians still argue whether oral traditions like these are literal myths or poetic frameworks to remember practical knowledge. Celestial navigation, planting seasons, animal migrations. Some say they're memory devices. Others argue they're expressions of spiritual truths too nuanced for linear storytelling. You nod, pretending to understand. You mostly don't, but it doesn't matter. Something about it feels honest. And maybe that's what counts. The quirky fact of the night? Certain tribes believed that stories only had full power when spoken under starlight. That by day, they slept like animals in their dens. Some even had taboo rules. Tell a winter story in summer, and you might wake up with your eyebrows missing. Coincidence? Maybe. But you've met a few suspiciously hairless uncles in your time. Later, a younger man takes over. He's nervous at first, fidgeting with a carved bead on his necklace. Then he tells the story of his great-grandfather, a man who once walked 200 miles to deliver a single song to another village. Not for ceremony or trade, but because he'd been told in a dream that someone there needed it. You wonder if the person who heard that song ever knew it had arrived by foot. The story shifts again. Now it's about a grandmother who used to hide love notes inside berries. Yes, actual berries. She'd hollow them out, dry the insides, and slip in a paper scrap with tiny handwriting. "You are more than your wrinkles," she wrote to her sister. "You are the laugh that made them." The community considered her odd, but harmless. A berry witch, they called her affectionately. She replied, "Even witches need hugs." You smile. It's a good story. Then, Unexpectedly, someone points to you. Your turn, they say, passing a stick your way. You panic again. You don't have a myth. You don't know a single star's name. You're not sure if you're even pronouncing quinoa right yet. But you accept the stick, clear your throat, and tell a story of your own. It's not ancient. It's about the time you got lost in a supermarket at age 7, only to be rescued by a kind janitor who gave you an orange soda and a map of aisle numbers scribbled in pen. You say you've never forgotten his face, even though you don't remember his name. They listen, nodding. One woman says softly, "That's a map story." You ask what she means. She explains that map stories are the ones that help us find our way, especially when we didn't know we were lost. The fire shifts and pops like it's clapping for you. Someone else shares a memory about a raccoon that stole every spoon in their house over the course of 3 nights. Only the spoons, she says. The forks were too stabby, I guess. Her family called it the silver thief and left it offerings of peanut butter until it moved on. There's something freeing about a night where raccoon burglars and cosmic turtles get equal narrative weight. At one point, you wander away from the fire, needing to stretch. The sky above you is absurdly full of stars. Not polite suburban stars, but wild, unapologetic ones. Like glitter spilled by a clumsy god. You hear 2 teens off to the side trading ghost stories. One tells of a mountain that hums lullabies when no one's looking. The other insists she once met a deer who told her to get over her ex. It wasn't the words, she insists. It was the look. You suspect deer are great at passive-aggressive wisdom. Nearby, a man is sketching faces in charcoal onto flat river stones. One has lips pursed in eternal judgment. Another has eyes like they just tasted regret. He lets you try. Yours ends up looking like someone who got stuck between a sneeze and an apology. He approves. We're not meant to be perfect, he says. We're meant to be true. The fire behind you roars softly, and a new voice begins. It's a child now, no more than 6. Telling a half-remembered story about how the wind once stole her favorite sock and used it as a kite. No one corrects her. No one laughs. Someone says, "That explains a lot about this breeze." And that's the thing about storytelling here. It's not about authority. It's about presence. Whether your tale is carved from 10,000 years or 10 minutes ago, if it's offered sincerely, it matters. Quieter now, the fire sinks low. Someone hums a lullaby in the old language. It has no translation, you're told. Only meaning. You settle back, eyes heavy, heart lighter. You wonder if your supermarket story will be passed on, if someone might whisper about the orange soda map years from now. And then you remember what the old woman said. It's not tradition. It's rhythm. And tonight, you are part of the rhythm. The morning creeps in slowly, like someone trying not to wake you. But you're already up. Not because you had to be, because the smell of food has a way of lifting even the heaviest eyelids. Smoke drifts from a fire pit where flat, round cakes of dough are browning on hot stones. A pot bubbles with something thick and fragrant, corn, beans, and squash, you think. You shuffle closer, rubbing your arms, the morning chill still clinging to your sleeves like a cat that refuses to let go. Breakfast, it turns out, is no casual affair here. It's a quiet ceremony, stitched together with gestures and murmurs. You're handed a bowl and a hunk of bread still warm from the stone. The bread tastes slightly smoky, slightly nutty, and entirely like something your modern kitchen could never recreate, even with 3 appliances and a Google recipe. They call this the 3 Sisters stew. Corn for the spine, beans for the soul, squash for the smile. These crops, you learn, were traditionally planted together, each one supporting the other's growth. Corn stands tall, beans climb it, squash covers the ground and keeps out weeds. A botanical support group. Historians still argue whether the 3 Sisters method was truly universal among all indigenous nations or more regional. But no one argues that it worked. It was sustainable, smart, and, judging by your second helping, delicious. You're not the only one enjoying the meal. A dog with mismatched eyes waits politely a few feet away. You sneak him a piece of bread. He blinks slowly in thanks and returns to whatever dog thoughts occupy his morning. After breakfast, someone invites you to join a walk. Not a hike, A walk. There's a difference, you're told. Hikes have destinations. Walks are about listening. You follow a winding trail that threads through brush and tall grasses, passing medicine plants you would have mistaken for weeds. Your guide points out each one. That's yarrow, good for wounds. That's sweetgrass, braided for ceremonies. That's wild mint, perfect for stomachaches and tea. You nod, taking it in, realizing the forest is less chaotic than you thought. It's organized, just not in a way your phone's map could understand. Then you reach the trees. Not just any trees. These are ancient cottonwoods. Their trunks gnarled like old knuckles, their branches whispering above you in some leafy dialect. One has a knot in the shape of an eye. Another leans just slightly toward the east, as though it's trying to remember the sunrise. Your guide presses her palm to the bark and closes her eyes. You do the same, and although it sounds like something out of a children's yoga class, you swear you feel a pulse. Not in the tree, but in you. You're told the forest used to be thicker here. Before the metal roads, someone says, meaning highways. Before lines got drawn. It's not bitter, just a fact. Like the way snow melts eventually, even when you wish it wouldn't. Quirky fact time. Some indigenous stories describe trees as sleeping grandfathers whose dreams shaped the land. One tale says the first squirrel was born from a tree's sneeze because it sniffed too much pollen while gossiping with the wind. You'll never look at an oak the same way again. Further along, you stop at a wide patch of earth cleared intentionally. A circle of stones lines the space, and in the center, a wooden pole reaches upward like a spine. This is the start of a sweat lodge. You're told, not in use now, but waiting. A place for prayer, sweat, silence, and steam. You're invited to enter, not the physical lodge, but the idea of it. So, in your mind, you do. You imagine the steam rising like old pain leaving your body. You imagine your regrets liquefying in the heat. You imagine your doubts peeling off like bark. You're not sure how long you stand there, but when you return to your breath, it feels clearer, like someone has dusted off your lungs. By late morning, you circle back toward the village, passing children playing a traditional game involving sticks and a leather ball. Similar to lacrosse, but the rules are far older. One kid waves at you with a grin missing 3 teeth. You wave back and pretend not to wince when the ball narrowly misses your shin. At the edge of the village, you pass a grandmother sitting on a wooden stool, stringing beads onto a necklace. She gestures you over. You sit beside her, trying not to knock over anything. Her hands move with confidence born from repetition, and her beads are tiny bursts of color against her weathered fingers. She tells you each color means something. Red for courage, blue for clarity, white for truth, green for growth, black for endurance, yellow for joy. You ask if there's a color for confusion. She chuckles and says, "That's what the whole necklace is for." You help her string a few beads, though your coordination is more toddler with pudding than artisan. Still, she nods in approval. "You're not hopeless," she says, like it's a compliment. You accept it. As the sun climbs, someone brings out a small drum and taps a slow, steady rhythm. It's not a performance, it's just time to drum. The sound is less about music and more about breath. Thump, pause, thump, like a heartbeat echoing across soil and skin. You sit back, letting the rhythm settle into your bones. You're not sure what time it is. You don't care. There's no agenda here.
No productivity hack.
Just this moment, this breath, this place where corn, beans, and squash are sisters and trees might dream. And for the first time in a long while, you feel full. Not just from stew, from presence. You wander further, belly full and spirit quiet, to a space on the edge of the village where time seems to stretch like a cat in the sun. Here, in what looks like an ordinary clearing, something unexpected unfolds. A lesson in crafting tools the old way. Not with power drills or measuring tape. With bones, stones, and patience. Your teacher is a man who looks like he's been carved out of tree bark and dusk. His face doesn't move much, but his eyes flicker like campfire sparks. He shows you how to shape a piece of obsidian into a blade, not to use, but to understand. Each flake you chip away slices with the sound of a fingernail on glass. You quickly realize why patience was once considered a survival skill. Most cuts came from the making, he says, showing you a thin scar on his thumb. You nod, careful now, aware of how sharp ancient things can be, both the tools and the memories behind them. Historians still argue whether early native tools were as refined as some claim or if modern admiration adds a sheen of romance. But one thing is certain, they worked. Spearheads that could drop a deer, scrapers that turned hide into softness, awls that stitched lives together one puncture at a time. And then, because your hands are sore and your fingers feel like overcooked pasta, you set the stone down and watch. That, too, is a kind of learning. The toolmaker hums as he works, something low and steady. It isn't a song you recognize, more like the shape of a song, something meant for the trees and whoever listens under them. Later, you're invited to help with dyeing and weaving, tasks you assumed involved yarn and grandma's knitting under blankets. Instead, you're plunged into the alchemical mystery of color pulled from nature itself. Blue from indigo leaves, red from crushed cochineal beetles, tiny insects wildly useful and somehow not as gross as you imagined. Yellow from sunflower petals, browns from walnut shells, and a shade of green so soft it makes modern neon look like a crime. The fabric isn't just cloth. It's memory made visible. You're shown how to press the dyed threads through a simple loom, creating patterns that aren't decorative, they're narrative. Stories, relationships, maps of rivers and kinship lines, all woven in wool or bark fiber. You fumble with the threads, getting lost somewhere between over and under. Someone helps you gently. You both laugh. Quirky fact. In some tribes, the weft and warp were referred to in familial terms, one strand the mother, one the father. The cloth, their child. You quietly promise not to tangle their family up too badly. As the sun begins to tilt, casting shadows long enough to trip over, a group gathers near a small open space encircled by stones. No sign, no announcement, just a shift in mood, like the way a crowd quiets before fireworks. This is story time, but not the kind with pirates or princesses. These are the origin tales, the ones that explain how the land, the animals, and even you came to be. You settle onto a folded blanket as a woman with a voice like velvet and gravel begins. She speaks of Coyote, the trickster, who once tried to steal the sun because he wanted it for a lantern. Of Turtle, who carried the earth on her back, not because she was strong, but because she was steady. Of Wind, who never listened but always learned. And of humans, created from clay and kindness, with just a pinch too much curiosity. It's hard to tell where the story ends and your thoughts begin. Somewhere in the telling, night takes hold. Someone offers you a warm drink made from steeped pine needles and sweetgrass. It smells like forest and memory and tastes like something your immune system sends thank you notes for. There's a sense of ritual to it all, not because anyone says so, but because everything here, from obsidian blades to pine tea, feels touched by attention, as if each thing knows it belongs. And for a fleeting second, you wonder if that's what you've been missing all along. Not just history, not just nature, but that quiet sensation of belonging not in a title or a group, but in the sheer, unhurried act of being part of a world that remembers things differently than you do. You glance at the stars now pricking through the sky. They look unchanged, eternal. But someone leans over and tells you, that one there? In our stories, it's a grandmother keeping the fire lit. And suddenly, the night doesn't feel so dark. The fire burns low now, and you think that maybe this is it, that the night has closed and the stories are done. But you'd be wrong, because in this place, when the stars come out, the quiet work begins. Someone hands you a slender branch with a feather tied to one end and a flat, smooth stone to the other. You're about to ask if it's a decoration when a soft voice nearby explains. It's a dream catcher frame, and tonight, if you'd like, you can make your own. You're not sure whether it's the warmth of the fire or the way she says, if you'd like. So soft, like it doesn't really matter if you say yes or no, but you find yourself nodding. Soon you're sitting in a circle, fingers fumbling with sinew thread and tiny beads. You try to mimic the spiral web others are weaving, but yours looks like a spider was half asleep or maybe had one leg in a cast. Still, there's something deeply calming about the motion. Loop, pull,
Noit.
repeat. The woman next to you whispers. Each one catches what you carry. She doesn't elaborate, but you think about it as you wind the last thread around the hoop. What are you carrying? A little loneliness, maybe. Some regret. A few warm memories you keep pressed like leaves in your mind. Historians still argue over whether dreamcatchers originated with the Ojibwe or the Lakota. But either way, they've traveled far, picked up by pop culture and airports turned into trinkets. Yet here, in the hush of night, with smoke trailing up into constellations, it feels real again. A net for the weary, place for your thoughts to land. A man begins softly drumming near the center. The beat is gentle, steady like your own breath when you're almost asleep. 1, 2, 1, 2. A heart outside your chest. A second pulse for the evening. Then a chant. Not words you understand, but sounds that rise and fall like wind on tall grass. Some sing along. Others simply close their eyes. You don't realize your own shoulders have dropped, that your jaw has unclenched, until your cheeks start to ache. Somehow from both smiling and letting go. It's a good ache. A few moments later, the storyteller returns, not to tell a tale, but to show you a bundle of plants. Cedar, sage, sweetgrass, and tobacco. The sacred four. You learn that these aren't just herbs, they're invitations. Prayers in leafy form. Medicine for the parts of you that can't be seen in an X-ray. Each one does something different. Cedar cleanses, the scent chasing out what doesn't belong. Sage protects. Sweetgrass draws in the good, like honey for your soul. And tobacco, well, you're told that tobacco is the carrier. It lifts your words, your wishes, your thanks. You're invited to offer a little. You pinch a bit of each and place it on the fire. The smoke rises, slow and curling. Maybe it carries your thoughts with it. Maybe it just smells nice. You decide both are true. Quirky fact. Some indigenous communities believe that sweetgrass braids represent kindness, honesty, and strength. 3 strands twisted together so tightly that not even time can pull them apart. You look at the braid in your hand and think, yeah, we could all use a little more of that. A hush settles again. You lie back on a woven mat, head tilted toward the sky. The stars seem closer tonight, like they've taken a step down just to keep you company. The air smells of wood smoke and sage and something else. Something older. Someone reads softly from a hide scroll nearby. Not a story this time, but a record. A listing of seasons, births, harvests, songs. The kind of calendar you don't hang on a wall, but hold in your chest. This is how history used to be kept. Not in books or servers or headlines, but in memory, in voice, in the grain of a drum, in a child's name, and somehow it worked. Historians still debate how oral traditions managed to preserve entire genealogies over centuries without getting tangled or lost. But listening now, you understand. It's not about memorizing. It's about belonging. When something is yours, you carry it more carefully. A gentle tap on your shoulder. Someone offers you a small carved animal, a bear with one paw lifted. You take it unsure what to do. It's for dreams, they say. Put it under your blanket tonight. Tell it one thing you hope to remember. You nod slowly, running your thumb along its smooth back. Feels cool and steady, like it knows what to do. Around you, others begin to drift to sleeping spaces, some in lodges, some under the open stars. You linger, not out of hesitation, but because something about this space feels different now. Not just a place in a story, but a story you've entered. The wind rustles the trees like fingers through hair. The embers glow like shy fireflies. And you, for once, don't feel like a visitor. You press the little bear to your chest for a second, then slip it under your blanket as instructed. You whisper one hope, not out loud, just silently into the hush. And you wonder, just for a moment, if maybe, somewhere down the line, someone else might remember this night, folded into their own story, told with soft eyes and steady breath. You wake before the sun, but not before the sky. It's that blue-gray hush of early morning. the kind that makes even the birds hold their breath for a while. A few embers still whisper in the fire pit, casting just enough glow to guide your way. Someone hands you a cup. It's not coffee. It's something warmer in a different way, maybe a tea made from spruce tips and wild mint. You sip and feel your lungs wake up slowly, politely, like old dogs stretching by the hearth. No one rushes here. There's no alarm, no announcement. People just begin to gather again, shoulder to shoulder, quietly preparing for a morning that carries the scent of memory. Today's story isn't one of great battles or famous names. It's about something quieter, how knowledge is passed not with fanfare, but with care. A grandmother, her long braids streaked silver and coal, sits near a patch of earth. She's not preaching, she's planting. A child next to her mimics each motion. Press the soil, drop the seed, cover it gently like tucking in a baby bird, and you realize you're watching a ceremony. Not in the grand sense, but in the everyday holiness of it. A ritual so old it predates even language. The ceremony of teaching. Mainstream fact: among many Native American cultures, teaching wasn't relegated to formal schools or institutions. Instead, it was embedded in daily life, skills transmitted through watching, mimicking, and participating. Want to learn how to paddle a canoe, cure a fever, or predict the weather by clouds? Stick with your grandmother, or your uncle, or that quiet person who never raises their voice but always knows when the geese will come back. There's no classroom here, just a clearing, a soft voice, and time. Lots of time. You walk slowly through the early morning paths. In one area, someone's weaving baskets, tight coils of grass, dyed with berries, shaped into soft curves that somehow hold firm. In another spot, a boy no older than 10 is showing a group how to start a fire with a bow drill. The older ones let him lead.
No correcting.
No stepping in. Just respect. Quirky tidbit. Did you know some tribes created cradleboards not just as baby carriers, but as early classrooms? Babies were swaddled upright and carried close to their mothers while they worked, absorbing rhythms, speech, motion, even smell, learning by proximity before they could even speak. And maybe that's the key here. Proximity. You learn not by being told, but by being near, by witnessing, by being included. You sit beside an older man whittling a flute. He doesn't greet you with small talk, just hands you a sliver of wood and a knife, then keeps carving. You copy his motion, careful, steady, slow. The wood curls like cinnamon ribbons. The breeze carries faint notes from another flute somewhere in the distance. A high, lonesome tune. Not sad, not happy, just full. The man finally speaks without looking up. You can teach a man to sing by handing him a song. But if you want him to find his own, give him silence. You nod, or maybe you don't. But either way, you understand. Historians still argue how indigenous knowledge systems could retain accuracy without written records, especially across thousands of miles and dozens of generations. But perhaps it's because everything was treated as valuable. A plant wasn't just a leaf, it was a medicine, a warning, a teacher. A cloud wasn't just a shape, it was a message. Everything meant something. You remember a moment from the night before. Someone gently brushing ashes over the fire to keep it smoldering.
No wasted motion.
Just quiet care. And now, as you watch a mother teach her daughter how to prepare corn for drying, scraping, rinsing, laying it out, you realize this is how a culture survives. Not in museums, but in motions repeated under a rising sun. You glance around. The teaching isn't just from old to young. Sometimes it's reversed. The child showing the elder how to use a small solar panel to charge a radio. A teenager explaining climate data. A hybrid dance of memory, and now you sit again, this time with a woman painting delicate lines on deerskin. Not a decoration, she explains, a map. Not of roads or towns, but of stories. A river where a marriage happened. A mountain where someone dreamed of wolves. A bend in the path where a lightning strike split an old cedar in two. All noted, all remembered. You ask her if she worries the stories will vanish. She smiles without looking up. Stories don't vanish. People just stop listening. Then, quietly, but not you, you sit a little straighter, not to impress, just to absorb. You find yourself holding your breath, not wanting to interrupt the moment, the brushstroke, the morning. Around you, the village comes slowly to life. Someone offers fry bread and wild berries. A radio hums softly with a scratchy country station. Someone's personal touch. Laughter bubbles up nearby. The day begins in no rush. And you finally exhale. Because here, learning isn't pressure. It's permission. And maybe, just maybe, you're allowed to carry some of this with you. Like the little carved bear under your blanket, or the crooked dream catcher you tied by firelight. Not perfectly, not fluently, but honestly, the woman dips her brush again, marking a tiny line where the sky meets the ground. You ask what it means. She answers with a shrug. It means it's time. Time for what? She just smiles. And somehow, you understand anyway. It's nearing dusk now, but the day isn't ending. Not really. It's just shifting gears, gliding into that golden hour where everything feels touched by something ancient and kind. The light softens into amber syrup, pooling in the corners of your vision, turning shadows long and thoughtful. You walk past the central fire pit, its embers now awakened into delicate flames again, and notice a group gathering quietly. Not for spectacle, for story. The oldest man in the village is there. You'd guess he's somewhere north of 90, but time hasn't worn him thin. It's woven him thick, like a well-used rug that still holds its pattern. He settles onto a low stool carved from a single hunk of cedar. The children huddle in, and you, yes you, gently settle in the back. It doesn't matter that you're not from here. Story time is everyone's inheritance. Tonight's tale isn't about war or conquest. It's about a bird who couldn't sing and a river that forgot how to flow. He begins, not in English, not at first, but in his own tongue. The sounds are round, warm, textured like old moccasins. He translates as he goes, gently, with that cadence storytellers always find, the one that makes your breath slow and your ears perk up. Mainstream fact: many Native American nations place storytellers at the heart of their communities, often assigning them lifelong roles. These weren't just casual tales. They were oral encyclopedias, carrying genealogies, land wisdom, morality, and survival skills, all woven into narrative form. The children are entranced, not with shock and awe, but with quiet suspense. The kind that makes your eyebrows tilt upward without you realizing. The kind that reminds you why the flicker of fire and the rise and fall of a voice is one of humanity's oldest comforts. Quirky tidbit: in some tribes, stories could only be told during certain seasons, usually winter, when the world was hushed and the time was right for listening. Telling them out of season was thought to offend the spirits of the stories themselves. Summer was for living, winter was for remembering. Tonight, though, there's a gentle exception. You are a guest, and the storyteller makes room for you the way a mother might make room at her table even when dinner's tight. He finishes the tale with a grin that lands halfway between wisdom and mischief. The bird finds its song, the river remembers its path, and a coyote who's been watching the whole time pretends he wasn't impressed. You smile not because the ending was triumphant, but because it wasn't. It just was. Like all good stories, historians still argue whether oral traditions can be considered history in the academic sense, since they lack timestamps or archival proof. But as the storyteller leans back and watches the children mimic the tale with little hands and dramatic faces, you realize history that's lived, breathed, and remembered is often more durable than any paper. Later, you're invited to a quieter gathering, a dream-sharing circle. It sounds like something from a wellness retreat brochure, but it's simpler, older. Each person shares a dream they had the night before. Some are strange. A frog with wings, a tree that hums, a face in a lake. No one laughs. No one rolls their eyes. Dreams are treated like puzzle pieces, personal and mysterious, yes, but also worthy of being held up to the light. An elder explains, gently, that dreams are the soul's way of sorting what the mouth can't say. And sometimes they carry messages, not predictions, not fortune-telling, just Nudges. You think back to your own dream from the previous night. Something about a deer with soft, human eyes, leading you into a forest where the trees whispered your name. You don't share it. Not yet. But you tuck it away like a polished stone in your pocket. The evening continues in soft circles. Small games, shared food, quiet laughter. A toddler insists you join their game of pretend. You're a sleeping bear now, apparently, and must snore dramatically or face their tiny wrath. So you do. You play the part. You let yourself laugh so hard it feels like a sneeze of the soul. And as the stars begin to freckle the sky, you lie back on the ground, head resting on something soft and handmade. You watch the constellations blink awake. A voice next to you, maybe a teenager, points out one of the stars. That's not Orion, they say. That's the giant with the broken bow. They tell you their version, a story that mirrors and mocks the Greek myth but with its own rules, its own lessons. And again you see it, not just the star, the web, the way stories, names, even sky maps change depending on who's telling the tale and why. Nothing is fixed and everything matters. There's a moment where no one speaks, not even the insects. Then someone begins a song, low, rhythmic, almost a hum. Others join in. You don't know the words, but it doesn't matter. The melody finds its way inside your bones like warm rain. You close your eyes, and for a moment you're not a visitor. You're just another voice in the dusk. Maybe you dreamed all of this. Maybe none of it is real. But as someone quietly places a woven blanket over your legs and whispers, "Rest now," you realize it doesn't matter, because whatever this was, day, dream, or both, it gave you something soft to carry. And that's real enough. The morning doesn't arrive with trumpets or alarms. It just is, a gentle blueness that seeps into the sky, nudging away the stars one by one like someone tidying up after a good party. You stir slightly under the woven blanket. It smells of smoke and cedar and something faintly sweet. Maybe sage, maybe thyme. Your back should ache from sleeping on the ground, but somehow doesn't. There's a softness to the earth here, a kind of generosity. Before you even open your eyes, you can hear it. The low murmurs of a new day starting. There's no rush, no mechanical buzz. Just people, moving, preparing, living. And you, wrapped in the dream of yesterday, rise slowly and look around. Breakfast is modest but filling. A porridge made of something nutty and warm, topped with tiny berries so tart they make your face twitch pleasantly. You sit among your hosts, though no one calls them that anymore. The line between guest and family is blurry now. Today's plan is simple, a walk. Not a hike. Not an expedition. Just a walk. You're joined by a young woman and her grandfather. They move at the pace of thought, stopping every few feet to examine something. A plant, a bird's feather, a lopsided mushroom. She asks him questions you wouldn't think to ask, and he answers with stories you wouldn't think could be answers. Mainstream fact. Many native tribes practiced intergenerational learning not through formal schooling, but through daily life side-by-side mentorships that stretched across decades. The land itself was a classroom. At one point, you reach a stream that wasn't there yesterday. Or maybe it was, and you just weren't ready to see it. The water babbles like it's telling secrets. The girl cups her hands, drinks, and then looks at you expectantly. You hesitate, then drink. Tastes ancient, not old, ancient, like something that existed before the word clean had a marketing budget. Quirky tidbit. In certain Apache and Navajo traditions, water from specific springs was believed to carry dreams. Actual dreams, the kind you could borrow if you drank carefully and slept deeply enough afterward. You keep walking, and slowly the landscape changes. Not dramatically, but there's a shift. The trees thin out, replaced by open grassland. Birds will differently in the sky now, and somewhere in your chest, you start to feel the first tug of return. You know, without anyone saying it, that your time here is gently winding down. There's no big farewell.
No tirfelmantatge.
Just a series of goodbyes disguised as regular conversations. Someone slips you a small bag of dried herbs. Another presses something soft into your palm. a woven circle no bigger than a quarter, meant to hang by your bed. For your dreams, they say. Historians still argue whether short-term immersion can ever yield true understanding of another culture. Whether a few days among strangers can reshape a worldview. But as you prepare to leave, you suspect the point wasn't understanding. It was connection. And you have that now. Back at the edge of the village, the elder storyteller finds you. He's holding something that looks like a scroll, but turns out to be a long strip of tanned hide. On it, symbols are drawn, shapes, not letters. They curl like waves and spread like branches. He tells you it's not a map to anywhere. It's a map from somewhere. From here. From them. Don't read it with your eyes, he says. Read it when your heart forgets the shape of silence. And then, just like that, you're walking again. Not away, just onward. As the village fades behind you, you notice your steps falling into rhythm with the sounds around you. The chirp of a cricket, the rustle of leaves, even your own breathing. You're not walking through the land anymore. You're walking with it. There's one last hill. And when you reach the top, you pause. Below you lies a different world. Roads, maybe. A town. The hum of modernity. Your phone buzzes in your pocket. A text blinking back to life like a lighthouse returning from a fog. You take it out. You glance at the screen. And then you put it away. For now, you just want to remember the sky. The quiet. The story of the bird who couldn't sing. And the river that learned how. And as the breeze lifts a corner of your jacket, you hear something. Not a voice. Not music. Just a sense of being gently, deeply seen. You turn your face into the wind and begin to walk down. So now, as your body grows heavier and the edges of thought soften into mist, let yourself drift. You've traveled far tonight, not just across land, but across time, across culture, across layers of yourself you rarely get to touch. You've walked where voices move like wind, where silence is a kind of music, and where history hums under your feet like a quiet drum. Let those stories linger. The quiet rituals. The earth-stained hands offering you fire-roasted corn. The sound of laughter that meant nothing and everything. The stars drawn in a sky that doesn't belong to any one myth. You're not just returning from a village. You're returning with something. A new rhythm, maybe. A deeper breath. A story stitched into the folds of your sleep. The air around you now is soft. It carries a promise. That no matter how far you roam, you can always find quiet. You can always find yourself in the presence of something older, wiser, more patient than worry. So breathe in slowly. Let it fill your chest like morning fog over a river. And exhale, as if letting go of everything except this moment. No more words are needed. Only stillness. Only the sound of the fan. Only sleep.